Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies. In this video, I'm going to do a review of the Lagavulin Distillers edition, a double-aged in Pedro Jimenez cask. But before I get into this, let me tell you about the profile of Lagavulin Distillery and this whiskey. Lagavulin Distillery is located in the village of Lagavulin on the south end of the island of Islay, Scotland, neighboring Laphroaig and Ardbeg distilleries. The name Lagavulin is an Anglicization of a Gaelic term which means hollow of the mill. Lagavulin Distillery was founded in 1816 by John Johnston, who continued to operate the distillery at least until 1833. Diageo has been the owner of Lagavulin Distillery since 1997. Lagavulin Distillery's water source is Lochlan Sholom, which is located 200 meters above sea level, and the water flows down the hillside through the peat. Lagavulin's malt floors closed in 1974. They now source their malt from Port Ellen Maltings. Lagavulin has a 4.4 ton lauter mash tun, 10 washbacks made from larch with a 22,000 liter capacity and a 55-hour fermentation. Lagavulin has 4 stills, that is 2 wash stills and 2 spirit stills. Lagavulin's distillation strength is 68 to 69% alcohol by volume. Their cask fill strength is at 63.5% alcohol by volume. Lagavulin Distillery's core range. The Lagavulin 8-year-old Islay single malt Scotch Whisky, aged in ex-bourbon cask for at least 8 years, bottled at 48% alcohol by volume. Lagavulin 12-year-old cask strength Islay single malt Scotch Whisky. It's non-chill filtered, has natural color. ABV can differ from year to year at 56% alcohol by volume and higher. The Lagavulin 16-year-old Islay single malt Scotch Whisky, aged in ex-bourbon cask and bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. Lagavulin Distillers Edition Islay single malt Scotch Whisky. It's a non-age statement. It's aged in Pedro Jimenez cask. It's bottled at 43% alcohol by volume and sells for about $138 in my neighborhood. So all your other types of sherry are made from the Palomino grape. What distinguishes Fino, Amontillado, Palacantado, and Oloroso is the aging process, whether it's done biologically or aerobically, anaerobically, and decisions that are made in that process. Pedro Jimenez is a completely different grape. It's not even grown on the same soils. All those are on Alvareza soils. And it's not even, most of the time, even in the same region. It's not even from the Jerez region, but they can import it into Jerez or into the sherry region. Sometimes used as a sweetener in other sherries. As a standalone, Pedro Jimenez is sort of thick, like a syrup. The grapes are essentially raisins, and so it's a very heavy, viscous wine. And when you put whiskey into a PX or a Pedro Jimenez cask, the leftover or remnant Pedro Jimenez tends to very much cling on to whatever is put into that cask. So in terms of the impact of the smoke, it tends to moderate some of the smoke. Also, the wine itself, it's not a real big aromatic wine, and consequently it tends to hold back some of the aromatics on a whiskey as well. So I've said this a lot in my videos. A lot of whiskeys need some aeration, and of all the different styles and types of whiskey, peated whiskeys, in my experience, need the most aeration, allow them to breathe so that they can really express themselves, which is why I have been talking a lot and not immediately jump into this whiskey so I can give it some time to breathe. The other thing it needs is a drop of water. Now, I'm sure you've seen other whiskey tubers, maybe put a little bit of water. Ralphie does it all the time. Sometimes water helps, sometimes it doesn't. It's been my experience that peated whiskeys need the most aeration, and PX casks tend to need they have to. You gotta have that water and to really help them out, particularly in the finish. So if you have a PX cask whiskey, try it with some water and see if it doesn't help it a lot. Now I'm gonna tell you straight up. From the neck pour, this whiskey was very quiet. It really holding back a lot. It wasn't very expressive, as I just said. It needed some aeration. And what I found was on the palate, it had a nice entry and mid palate, but then it just fell off the cliff. It had like zero finish, but a simple teaspoon of water took this whiskey a long way. So let me go ahead and drop one in there. Sometimes you add water to bring ABV down, such as a cask strength. Sometimes you want it to open up. And you probably already know this, having watched other whiskey tubers, or if you've been watching me for a while. But for a PX cask, particularly this particular one, it adds 5 points to the whiskey. It improves it that much. So, very dense and concentrated chocolate, dried black fruit notes, figs, dates, raisins, but more prunes than figs and dates. On Oloroso, you get the figs, dates, raisins. You probably hear me say this a lot. But in PX, you get more prunes. And on this, you get more chocolate-covered raisins. There's a hint of nuttiness. Spice starts to come up, particularly after you've had some water. Before that, almost no spice. On the palate, this whiskey is really, really, really rich. Really, really rich. Those prunes are there, dark chocolate, chocolate-covered raisins, some nice salinity, some saltiness going through it. Just a hint of vanilla. What lingers is a waft of smoke that's been interwoven into all the other characteristics, and then dark chocolate and a little bit of spice. It doesn't have the greatest amount of variation in transitions from front into the middle and into the finish. It's very deep. On my palate, it tends to go straight down the middle. There are some whiskeys you try them on and they sort of go east, west, and north in your mouth, sort of be mouth coating. This tends to want to hang around just down the center of your palate. It doesn't hurt to put a little bit in your mouth and just hold it there. To really savor this whiskey, you got to do a little bit of work into it. You got to hold on to it, maybe a little swishing around in your mouth, just a little bit. And sort of chew on it. Really, it's not swishing as much as chewing on it. It does dry in the mid palate. It does have a little bit of tannin going on there, a little bit of astringency. So it's got some sweetness, it's got some astringency, which I think gives a nice counterbalance. You don't want to be necessarily unctuous all the way through and just sweet upon sweet upon sweet. It does dry a little bit, it does have some backbone to it on the back end. This is a deep, dark, and fruity whiskey. I think it's well balanced for the particular style of wine that it is, for the particular cask. You can't expect what you get from an Oloroso cask from a PX cask. That's not the style of whiskey. The play on this whiskey is, I would say, is after dinner and you want something very, 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 very rich and satisfying, or a real nice sort of sit by the fire sipping whiskey. Doesn't have a great range of flavors, and you shouldn't necessarily expect it from this type of whiskey. 43% ABV, it's easy to drink, there's no bite, anything like that. It has a creaminess to it, a nice creamy mouthfeel to it, with a slight drying on the back end. For the type of whiskey it is, I really, really, really like it, but to give it more complexity and to really get me on the 90 points and up, I would want something more to it, which in order to get that, you're gonna add a little bit of Oloroso. I prefer, if you're going to use PX cask, an Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez combination, such as they have at, say, like Glendronach. Glendronach tends to combine the two, and a lot of other producers do as well. You need something else to sort of fill in more in the mid palate and give you more variation. What would I give it in terms of a score? I'm going to give it a solid 87, 88 points, somewhere in that range. It's nice for what it is, but this is also going to be a type of whiskey that I am in the mood for something really, really, really dark and rich. The way you might want a little bit of, deep chocolate cake after dinner. In fact, you might even be curious to try this with a little bit of chocolate cake for dessert. All right, that's it for this video. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, I would greatly appreciate it. If you would subscribe, ring the bell to be notified for when I go live or post a new video. Until next time, Slanja.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.